Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone, for joining today for the AMA. The context and background is in the document. We moved to, we are looking and trying to move from unused feature to driving monthly active usage, and this is an AMA around that. So let's get started. I think the first question is from Sarah, who was not on the call, so maybe I'll verbalize it. Regarding priority 8, there are some categories like incident management that are not feature complete. In order to get internal teams to dog food, mature the category to complete, and drive adoption, we need to add new features versus focusing on streamlining existing experiences because the main JTBD is not possible. I want to clarify this so we have all the same understanding. And I think, Victor, are you on the call? Because I think you have +1, so I want to just gather all that together. I don't see Victor on the call. Okay, so let's just answer Sarah's question. I think there are a set of pre-product market fit bets or investments, and if we feel that for that to go in the right direction with adoption, we need to finish some features to get a huge improvement in adoption on monetization, then that's what the teams should decide on. Because in the end, the whole purpose of moving from unused features to feature adoption is to drive sort of prioritization with that lens, not necessarily to say everybody should do only one thing.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one too. So I think it's really important to note that the spirit of this change is historically and documented as such, and we talked about it a whole lot, our entire focus was on breadth over depth. And essentially what we're doing now is we're shifting that somewhat. We're saying rather than having an exclusive focus on new features, now we're focused on making sure that what we have is what customers are asking for and want to use. And in some cases, that's going to require some new features because we have less mature stages that are newer and just need some baseline features available for them to be valuable, because really what this comes down to is value for our users. In other stages, that's not as true. In other stages, we've got a lot of really robust features there, and you'll even hear users, when you look at Hacker News or our user research, saying things like, in parts of your app, you have so much that I don't know what to do with everything that you have. In those cases, probably streamlining and focusing on usability is going to offer more value to our customers than piling more new features on. So the way that I'm seeing it as the leader of our UX team is product management is still the DRI for prioritization. Each product manager is still the DRI for prioritization. It's up to that product manager to look at their scope of influence and make a smart decision about what is most important for them to prioritize in the moment. And in a lot of ways, this frees the product managers up from feeling like they have to focus on new features to saying, what is going to be most valuable for me and my team to push usage? And hopefully we'll all be thinking about this together, because this is not just usage per stage group. Ultimately, what we're looking for is usage across the product, because we know the more stages that users use, the more valuable they are as customers, their retention is better, the revenue ends up being better. So coming from a UX perspective, that's how I'm looking at it is, yeah, so now what we're saying is things like usability and fixing bugs and tech debt are also important in addition to new features. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, this is Fabian. If I can just pitch in and fully second what Christy had said, but also I'll link a resource below. I think in the product book club, maybe 6 to 9 months ago, we read a book called Escaping the Build Trap, which actually focuses on specifically this phenomenon where if you focus on outputs, there it is, right? You focus on the output, which in our case is just cranking out more and more features, you actually forget about the outcome for our users, right? And I think I understand this change as, actually focusing on user outcomes, and those can be achieved in various ways depending on where your stage is at, what problems you're facing. But just adding more features is not the solution to the problems of your users necessarily, right? It still may be, but not all the time.
Thanks, Fabian. Should we go over Victor's +1? I just want to verbalize it if he's not here for the team. He essentially said, +1, infrastructure as code and Kubernetes are in similar situations. My understanding is the change is to prioritize user value or new features and avoid being a feature factory. So that's absolutely right. Keenan, are you here?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, more of the same that was typed above. I think there was just some confusion or different interpretations when this change came through, because I had a lot of stakeholders and people on the team ask, like, so are we not building these features we've been talking about for the last 6 to 9 months? And I think we just need to understand that and talk about how it's a framework that applies to stages, and different stages are going to be in different maturity, and so different priority decisions will be made, because specifically in portfolio management, we have some severe feature gaps we need to close to perform better in competitive considerations, and those need to be our top focus, because it will drive not only customer usage but additional ICV and expansion, while also plenty of UX improvements we can tackle too. So that's my point. We have to take into consideration the maturity of the feature or the group or even the stage when we make those decisions.
Thanks, Keenan, for verbalizing that. We'll move to, I think, item number 3, Clement.
Yeah, I can verbalize. This is more out of curiosity in retrospect. Is this something that we should have kind of done this shift prior to this year, like before COVID, so we would have been better, aligned or set up for COVID?
So I'll give a quick answer, and I'll see if Scott and others who have been here longer have a better or longer perspective on it. My perspective coming in, and I just came in right at COVID time, was that, hey, if we have strong growth coming in, we have the cash and we have the opportunity, then doing breadth is a great strategy, right? Because we are, also being able to share our vision and create some basic infrastructure so that community can all contribute and have a real honest dialogue about where we want to go. So I rationalized it with that lens and said, well, that was a different time, and this is a 1 in 100-year event, and so it's a very different time. Scott or Christy or Christopher, if any of you want to jump in?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Last fall, when we were heading into FY21, at one point we thought we were going to hire hundreds more people in R&D, and when that's the lens you're viewing the world through, then it's very much about expansion and adding capability and going wide and establishing that single app. And when that's your mission, the breadth over depth guidance makes a lot of sense. Now, we probably should have shifted earlier, and we tried to do this some through the FY20 goal of doubling down on our strengths. Like, we recognized we had gone wide and we needed to double down on our strengths. And so sort of the next click down on that is let's really improve that core experience. Let's make sure people land well. So I think from a prioritization strategic standpoint, we were there with those. We didn't fully shift guidance on what to prioritize for the whole team because of the notion that we were still going wide in lots of areas. Now that we have more constraints on our R&D growth, it makes more sense to make that guidance a bit more broad.
I'll share one other perspective, because I think when we talk about the kind of retrospective question, Clement, the time frame is important. Prior to 6 months ago, we also spent a good 18, 24, 36 months building the breadth that we have today, which is what has made us successful. Like, think about, we have a whole package set of features. We have a whole monitor set of features. We have a whole release set of features. We have plan capabilities that are far more robust. So let's not discount the breadth that we've built. We've built a ton of breadth and it's super useful. We just want to make sure that now we're focused on driving usage of that and value attainment from that breadth.
Thanks, Kenny. Okay, item number 4, Patrick.
Yeah, so Scott, in the discussion on the 18th of last month, and over time, we've talked about this is a pretty dramatic cultural shift for people who've been here for 5 years, right? Like, this is dramatically different from what we've rewarded culturally. And you've spoken about shifting what we reward and shifting like how we focus on those things from a cultural perspective. Like, how are we going to do that? Like, how can we make sure that we're continuing to reinforce this cultural change?
You want me to take that one, Noop?
Sure, I can add to it.
One specific idea we're going through. Well, we're now in a cadence of doing monthly, KPI reviews for each of the teams, performance indicator reviews. So that's one thing, is we're checking in on that. We're seeing how we're going, how we're doing. We're using that to guide our prioritization. So that's a new rhythm that will reward improvements around usage. It will reward the right kind of thinking about connecting what you're doing to more usage. Also, we're going to collect highlights from that we'll share on product team calls to show wins around usage, highlight examples of good usage driving kind of thinking. And we'll try to use that every month to report back to the product team so that people see examples of what we're trying to go for here. I'm open to other suggestions, but that's the first one.
I'll just quickly add in and then I'll add it to the agenda. I know one of the ways that PMs really like to highlight their work is through the monthly release post. And there's always been questions about, well, is that just new features? Can I highlight other things that are valuable to users in the release post? And the answer is yes, absolutely. If you're doing, for example, usability work, you're really improving this experience of your stage, and you want to make sure that not only customers, but also internal folks know about that, the release post is an excellent way to get visibility to that. So please do.
And I'll also admit that this is just a beginning. So we haven't really figured out what would be the other behaviors that we want to highlight and encourage everyone to aspire to. So feel free to add suggestions and inputs to improve this. Right.
On that,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. On that point, Noop, I do think, Patrick, you described it as kind of dramatic. We reward behavior based on our values. And if anything, this strengthens our ability to reward the value of results. Before, from a product perspective, our results was kind of, did you hit a category maturity that you said you were going to, or did you create a new MVC? Now it's going to be about, like, we can see the performance indicators that show there are real results, and we can reward, just like we do for any of our other values, team members for achieving those results.
Thanks, Kenny. All right, item 5, Nicholas click not on the call. So let me verbalize it. Do we have a way currently of quantitatively deriving adoption and retention metrics for our various features? Do we have solid ways of measuring how specific features attract and retain users? Can these be measured over time so we can iterate, we can map specific features or release updates to specific changes in our metrics? Obviously, maybe this is not achievable for self-hosted, but for .com at least. I have used Mixpanel heavily for this purpose. I'll take this one and then please add as you have information. So I'm sure several members on this call and otherwise at GitLab have come from places where we have used things like Mixpanel, like Amplitude, like Pendo, or homegrown systems to measure and with a statistically high confidence attribute changes in the product to a growth of some dimension, whether it's growth in usage, growth in success of a job to be done, reduction in failures, things like that. So that question obviously shows that, and it's great to have that thought process. I'd say Scott talked about the monthly KPI meetings, and I think that's the beginning of it. Last quarter, we had OKRs to instrument a lot of our primary performance indicators. This quarter, we have OKRs and goals to instrument group MAU. And all of these are getting us in that direction. I would actually even also add a pseudo caution here, which is to say that it's very different for Ubers of the world or DoorDashes or, take your social interaction commercial platform to make very minor changes to the system and do A/B testing and then pick the one that's better. We are in a different space, so it takes longer to figure out if something actually worked. It also takes, it has to go through a sales cycle if you want to measure it for enterprises versus mid-market or SMB. And we are not going after the same outcomes. We are not going after, can you spend more and more time with GitLab? We are going after, can you come in, do the job you wanted to do as easily and as quickly so that you can go back to doing what you do best. If you're a developer, you can go to developing. If you're a designer, you focus on your design, and so on and so forth. So the tool is to help make you efficient and better, not the other way around. So that's the trick we have to figure out on how we measure that. And that's why adoption and monetization are two goals instead of just time spent or things, transactions and things like that. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add.
I'll add a couple other challenges. He's asking whether we can tie this stuff to customer outcomes like retention. That's difficult for us for two reasons. One, we have a very broad product, and so attributing what we do, let's say in Monitor, to whether somebody retained or not is a question we can't answer with high confidence because there's so much that a customer interacts with that's tricky. What we can look at is sales selling the stuff that we're offering in this particular stage. Is this a key part of a sales pitch? Are we getting them to use it? Is the correlation between that usage and customer outcomes? We can arrive at some amount of correlation. For example, we correlated the number of stages customers use with their likelihood to become a paid customer. So we can do some amount of that, but because the product's large and the customers only buy one thing, it's tricky to associate pretty, stage or group level features with that other than through sort of anecdotal feedback from sales and customers. The other challenge is we have a privacy policy that's a little bit different from other SaaS programs. We do not today track individual users and their subsequent usage. We track what gets used, but we don't tie that to Scott or Noop. That also limits our ability to tie specific features to user behavior. We will probably have more flexibility there down the line, but it'll be on an opt-in basis. And so we'll probably never have quite the visibility that you would expect from other SaaS platforms because of the type of company we are, because of our open source roots, and because of the wishes of our customers.
I'm going to just add a little bit of insight or just thoughts. the constraints that you just mentioned, Scott, shouldn't prohibit us, right? Like that's like I would argue that that's most of those things that you just are describing are more about being precise rather than accurate. Like we should still have a pretty good grasp on how we can push adoption with those constraints is kind of my perspective on it, or at least that's kind of what we believe at this point, right? From that perspective.
Yeah, we think we can still get a lot of value out of the data we can get. That's why we're making such a big push on monthly active usage and all the rest, because we'll learn a lot from that. But his example of mixed panel is sort of the next step, which is tougher for us.
Right. We have 5 minutes. I'll go to the item 6.
Yes.
Epi, I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
It's fine. Given that there's an overlap between the term of the product prioritization and the engineering priority labels that we have, the priority 1 to 4, I wonder if we should, merge them somehow or differentiate them, because to me, it would be weird if I'm finding an issue that's a high priority one, let's say data loss, but it, actually has a low priority label or these kind of things. And I think especially for non-product team members, it's an extra mental overhead to keep a mapping like this that isn't this nice table to the actual issues in mind. And it's hard to use like our issue boards and sort them by priority and so on. So I wonder if we should, merge them or introduce a new one that describes, these priorities, so that, if I look on a list of issues, I immediately know, oh, wow, this is an important one from the product perspective.
Mike, you have something.
I'll jump in here real quick because we have not much time left. So thanks for highlighting this, Epi. So I want to be clear that the priority label isn't to replace the product priority main list. It should work off of the list. And if we see that there's a mismatch in priority decision making, then it's really good to call it out. I think this is because we recently moved over the SLOs from priority to severity. So now the priority labels are going to be true product management DRIs on it, and we can improve that. So we can take this as an action item and add an MR to this, starting with Crosslink, and see how we can communicate if there's any mismatch in using the priority label. Anyone else that would like to chime in?
All right.
Yeah, this is Gabe. Sorry, I can chime in a little bit. I'll add this to the thread, but that's one of the things that the issue prioritization working group is exploring right now, is how can we take the prioritization table and overlap it with basic value drivers and better understand the outcomes of prioritizing one thing over the other, whether it's an engineering priority or a product priority. I think both have different value profiles, but should be treated equally. So there's a working group right now that's exploring some of that. And if you want to follow along, feel free to join.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. Darwa?
I believe the question's been answered. Thank you all for answering that. I was just looking for a way to track the progress of this new strategy change, and I believe that it's been listed below. A lot of times we hear about strategy changes in engineering, and a lot of it, the ICs, the engineers want to know, okay, was it worth it? Did we actually make a change? What improved? So I was just looking for the right dashboards to track the content information.
Yeah, thank you. I think, thanks, Meg, for providing various links here. So those are showing you a lot of engineering performance indicators. There are also OKRs this quarter on total monthly active user goals that you've taken on as a team overall, as well as paid monthly active user. I'll link them into this doc for you to see how all of these come together at GitLab level.
Thank you.
I might also recommend paying attention to the product performance indicators pages. There's now one for dev, ops, secure, and enablement. And we're talking about usage here. And so that's where all the monthly active usage data is going to show up. I can add the links here now.
I'm going to vocalize despite the content of my copy paste. So the North Star should still be the metrics from product. So what Noop said and the Jamal Smile and the metrics from that Scott's going to link. From engineering, we're working on additional indicators that can help complete the view. So indicators from both UX quality, security, infrastructure that's going to span across all the product groups, mapping to engineering development directors, the sub-departments. So feel free to look at that. But this is meant to help complete the view. But the North Star should still be driven from product. And you can see that as we going forward, new features should have telemetry built in. And that's adding more data capabilities in on features will also help us get better at this over time.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions from anybody? Okay. Christopher, Scott, Christy, Mac, if you want to say anything else before we wrap up the meeting. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Feel free to ask more of these questions. We have another AMA coming up tomorrow, which is APAC friendly, but this is a start. These things take a little while for us to get into high gear. So I'm sure we're going to find other questions as we go along and keep raising them, and let's try to work together towards them. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good day.
Nice rest of the day.